Hey there riders, MotoJourno Chris here today, and I thought I'd have a talk about buying your first motorcycle and the topic of going new versus used. There's a lot of people who denounce buying a new vehicle under any circumstances, but as a first time rider it's worth having a proper look at the pros and cons of each of the options. A new vehicle will come with a warranty and all the consumables, that's tyres, brake pads, oil and such, will be in tip-top shape, and there are clearly set out servicing requirements that you'll just have to keep. You'll also get an on-road or out-the-door price on the bike, but this is where things get complicated if you do buy new or new with finance. You'll want or need comprehensive insurance, which is full insurance. And as a young, especially male motorcyclist, the price of this insurance is usually staggering. It can be anything between 30 to 50% of the value of the bike as a premium each year, and that's not that attractive, is it? And that's before you even consider the excess or deductible, which then is what you're charged if you have any at-fault accidents. Now, if you've saved up the necessary money, going for third-party property insurance, as we call it here in Australia, ensures that anyone else's vehicle is covered in an accident. However, you're up the creek if you damage your own bike, and unfortunately, if we're really honest here, as a new rider, that is sadly likely, or at least more likely than when you've got a bit more experience. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you do go for finance, then getting the full insurance will be part of the deal, which means that for a lot of people, it comes down to how much money you've got to spend. Now, one way to get around the whole comprehensive insurance pricing issue is if you share that motorcycle with a family member, particularly an older family member, like if you've got a mum or dad or possibly even an older sibling who rides. You can have the insurance in their name, and obviously it's going to be a lot cheaper with you as a secondary rider. However, of course, you need to make sure you're following the insurance company's requirements to do this so everything's legitimate, and you definitely don't want to find your claim being basically thrown back at you because you haven't followed the rules. Now, depending on where you're located in the world, another thing to think about is that there are beginner restricted motorcycles, and the requirements to use these, particularly here in Australia and in Europe, can help to inflate the price of used vehicles, and also make sure that a new bike purchase, when it comes to being resold, holds that value significantly better than it would in other parts of the world. One thing to also keep in mind here is if you're buying a brand new model, you're probably going to get a pretty good resale price as long as you haven't totally destroyed the bike when it does come time to sell, because obviously there's just not going to be that many of them available on the market. Now, there's also something intangible about being the first owner of a motorcycle, although how long you keep the bike will really come into the equation. Here in Australia, it's a 3-year licensing process, while in Europe it may be 2 years on the A2 license, and there are regions where you can just pretty much upgrade as soon as you're ready. So if you're only keeping the bike for say 6 months or a year, there's not going to be as much reason to buy a new motorcycle. When it comes to buying used, there's advantages for a young first rider. Straight up, the bikes are cheaper and there's less to worry about, at least on the monetary side of things, when it comes to dropping the bike and other minor damage. It may even come pre-damaged, which really kind of means that you can be a little bit more ambivalent when it comes to all those early drops and, kind of mishaps you have as a beginner rider. Now, obviously on a second-hand bike, basic insurance such as third-party property will do the trick, because obviously you've got a lot less invested in a lot of cases. There's bikes that are 20 plus years old that are still super capable beginner motorcycles, although definitely looking something a little bit newer can still get you a good bike at a great price. Now, you can also look at the used bikes for finding a larger capacity bike for cheaper, which I still definitely recommend going for a beginner machine. However, there are some great deals on those larger machines which will suit larger riders. Obviously, there's some great deals on the even higher power machines, but these tend to magnify the chances things can go wrong, since everything happens so much quicker if you're on a 600 Super Sport or a big 1000cc liter bike. And as a new rider, as you're learning those skills, and particularly if you don't have any real road experience, say from driving, it's important to pick a machine which is going to get you through that early learning process in a safe manner. Now, there are also great communities built around many of these older models, plus the new ones of course, and chances are for run-of-the-mill problems that you may experience buying a used bike, there'll be hundreds of riders who face the exact same issue that you are, and they can give you a good idea of what to do and perhaps how to save the most money in doing it. Sometimes there'll even be someone local within that community who might be able to give you a hand. The downsides of buying used, especially in a private sale, is you miss some of the guarantees a new bike and even a used dealer bike may offer, while you also need to be doubly careful to check the motorcycle hasn't been written off, stolen, or have any finance owing, as that debt will pass to you if you purchase it. Check the servicing record if it's available, and do your homework on any transfer costs or possible additional fees related to that purchase. You also need to do your research on the models you're looking at for common issues at specific kilometers or mileage, and the kind of outlay involved in fixing those issues, plus all the consumables on the bike. A great deal won't look so crash hot when you've spent the same amount again on servicing, new tyres, a brake overhaul, suspension work, electric or engine gremlins, or even repairing existing damage. There's plenty you can do yourself, but everything still adds up, and if you're off the road and need transport, that can be a crippling situation. On the bright side, you may get some useful modifications included on a used bike, like an aftermarket exhaust, crash protection, luggage, and maybe even modifications to solve those common issues I mentioned. You might also inherit someone else's dodgy modifications as well, so keep that in mind. Obviously, your best option is going to depend a lot on factors like your age, financial situation and budget, insurance record or lack thereof, and the type of bike you want, or the type of bike that's going to suit you. Then you've got to consider licensing regulations and possibly even your mechanical know-how or need for transport when picking that bike. So obviously buying a new bike is not for everyone, but one other thing to keep in mind is that all those people buying those new bikes are the ones making them available for you to buy on the used market. So it's worth keeping in mind when we all get high and mighty about buying a used bike much cheaper, that someone else buying that new is what enabled us to do that. And regardless of which way you go, you also should remember to invest in some good quality gear, especially a helmet. So set aside some money for that, and also keep in mind there's your yearly on-road costs and insurances of course, not to mention probably a service a year, and the cost of any servicing items yourself if you decide not to do it at a dealer. Hopefully that's given you a little bit more insight into buying new versus used. They're both very viable options. If you've got any questions, let me know. As always, stay safe out there. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, and I'll be back soon. Thank you.